I'm Sue Morgan, Executive Director and Acting Joint CE at Design Council. For the second year running, we're really pleased to be headline sponsors for the Festival of Place and the Pineapple Awards. Our experience and research shows that well-designed neighbourhoods and places have a transformative impact. The spaces between buildings, the blue and the green in the grey, creating fantastic places to live. This is why we are pleased and excited to sponsor the awards for excellent placemaking and place design at the Pineapple Awards this year. Please join us to celebrate the role design can play in helping us live more happy, healthier and sustainable lives.
Hello and welcome to the Pineapple Awards. My name is Christine Murray and I'm the founding editor-in-chief of The Developer and founding director of the Festival of Place. The Pineapples are all about celebrating best practice in making places. Awards are a powerful way to celebrate the ambition and realization of great places, and we're so grateful to the Design Council who have sponsored these awards since their inception and continue to support us this year. These awards are about the quality of the spaces created in between the buildings and the success from the citizen, resident, future resident, passerby, or neighbor's point of view. The pineapple is a traditional architectural symbol of welcome in the UK, and that's one thing we believe great places should be, welcoming. The pineapples are judged in 2 or 3 parts, depending on the category, and the final stage is always a live presentation to the judges, where they have the opportunity to ask our pineapple candidates about their ambitions for the project. So today we're judging the International Future Place category as part of the Pineapples Awards. And we're going to hear presentations from Arab on Mahindra World City Jaipur. And that's going to be presented by Sodal Ayazi and Jamie Traspadown and Arthur Smart. Then we're going to hear about Oktyabrsky Island, which is going to be presented by Evgeny Didorenko, an associate from LDA Design. And Future Energy Campus will be presented by Ian MacDonald, Principal Investigator from Artes University of the Arts, and Jacopo Buongiorno from MIT. Our judging panel today is Federica Barrico, an associate with CRTKL, Hilary Cuddy, Lead Program Manager from the Design Council, Johnny McKenna, Director of Dublin's Metropolitan Workshop, and Murray Levinson, a partner at Squire & Partners. So without further ado, I am going to invite the team from Arup to the stage to join me here to present our first pineapple project.
Thanks, Christine. We're going to talk today about Mahindra World City Jaipur and our master plan for the social infrastructure zone in that project. So the Mahindra World City project is a series of jobs-led cities across India, which look from Mahindra's perspective to develop a new kind of model for dealing with the challenges of urbanization across India, and look to kind of raise the level of the sort of working community and how they live in relation to where they work. So our project brief is just to the southwest or the site is just to the southwest of Jaipur, and our question really from the client was how to bring a residential environment in at 180 hectares to complement a very large employment-led site already established and being built out over time. So the Mahindra World City project is the first project in Asia to receive the Stage 2 certification from C40s, from the Climate Leadership Group, and those principles really helped to drive the project throughout. And one thing that we were all too soon to learn from our experience from site visits was the extreme weather conditions that have characterized Jaipur. So very hot and wet in monsoon, and very dry and very windy in the rest of the year. So really, and that's kind of driven our project throughout. So we'll cover off some of our responses to those particular conditions. But really, the overall intention was to create a sustainable development, a mix of housing, higher education, leisure, entertainment facilities that would complement the large employment function of the World City, but really seek to raise the bar and align itself with some of those C40 goals. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about 3 key ideas today. The first is how we sought to develop a sense of community, both with the existing sort of working community of the place already, and then imagining a future one. Thinking about landscape and open spaces as the real hero in the project and how it holds that place together over time. And then lastly, how our design and the sort of urban planning and the coding of the work was really driven by a climate response and a climate sensitive response. So that sense of community, really important to the project was that it wasn't just felt of as one place, but it was a collection of places. And we thought of that as a set of 10 interconnected communities using various different devices to hold them together. So the next slide, please. Really important to us in developing this was to start with people. So we were given a real kind of important way in to start to talk with some of the existing workforce. There's about 20,000 jobs on that site already, and a lot of people there that we could begin to engage with. And those stories, their kind of experiences really helped to drive some of the expectations of what this new place should be like. And then equally, we use techniques to imagine how the future of this city might be informed by some new people, some different people that might come as a virtue of the offer of that place. Next slide, please. So 2 real important devices for us, and a real key feature of how we evolved the plan away from just being a residential place into a place of much more mixed and diverse opportunities. One of those opportunities that we brought was some relationships with existing universities that were looking to expand. And we brought in an idea about not just a kind of campus within that zone, but a way of spreading out educational space and learning spaces across that whole piece of 180 hectares, and promoting that as a way of integrating, generating footfall, and creating different atmospheres and different opportunities for young people to see learning in relation to the work that they might do elsewhere in the city. And then the second important part of that mix of uses was the use of, as our client refers to as RED, so the retail, entertainment and dining element of that plan. So structured around that big, sort of almost international focused retail centre in the middle there at the 85%, with this collection of really local, useful communities, community facilities from retail to shopping to dining, really trying to draw on that Jaipur characteristic of the kind of active local streets. And then holding that together on the next slide, please, is a real principle that you should be able to get from inside your community to the things that you need in a short space of time. So we really pushed hard at the 5-minute walk, a diversity of homes, diversity of open spaces, and connectivity of uses around that kind of really small, walkable and shaded space. So I'm going to hand to Jaime, who's going to talk about some of the landscape devices that held that together.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. I would like to start talking about how important is the open space and the public realm is part of the intrinsic part of daily life, culture, and urban tradition in Jaipur. And this is evident in the historic center, which is defined by the interface between water, topography, and vistas, and the mosaic of parks, gardens, avenues, and courtyards. In response to this, we developed the concept of communities in landscape, and this is supported by the following core principles. The first one is that each resident or visitor will be less than 5 minutes walking distance from a high quality landscape or open space. Each community will have a plaza, integrated local and convenient stores, and amenities to support active community life. Finally, active routes will promote walkability and cycling among the communities to ensure that although they have these distinct personalities, they are coherent as a whole. In order to achieve this vision of communities in landscape, the team developed a landscape strategy based on a network of open spaces. This network is defined by a series of typologies, and each of typology plays a different role and function in the network. The Nevada Park will provide the key destination open space, including a range of formal and informal activities, water attenuation, and connections with a wider development. The green corridors will provide north-south shaded pedestrian cycling routes, linking the scheme into the wider area and incorporating a small garden, places to dwell, play, and rest, Also, these corridors function as a natural storm drainage system, collecting and slowing the water before reach the Nervata River. Community plazas provide a range of activities, fostering community and a sense of place at the local level. And finally, the walk that will provide a more urban and civic corridor that is flexible, seasonal, and shaded, connecting the Red District and the cultural and academic components of the scheme. The Nevada is the name of the dry river that crossed the site. However, the river is not dry all the time. During the monsoon season, the river experiments several flood events. We took that as an opportunity to use the park as the main structure for the framework for the master plan. And we use the park as well to collect the water. And we use very clever topography to use spaces under the park to collect water that we are going to use to irrigate the open spaces during the dry seasons. And now Sogol is going to talk about our microclimate strategies.
Thanks, Jaime. A climate responsive design was one of our core principles for the master plan, especially as Arthur mentioned, considering the extreme weather conditions in Jaipur. The objectives of our strategy was to maximize thermal comfort, provide comfortable walking and cycling environment, and also reduce energy uses. We developed a series of passive strategies from macro to micro, and the main principles here was to maximize solar shading and complement that by an effective natural ventilation strategy. Using solar assessment tools, we determined the optimal orientation for plots and pedestrian routes to improve thermal performance of buildings, but also to ensure that the main links between places provide a comfortable environment for pedestrians. Similarly, the cooling strategy in different scales aim to encourage the cool easter living while preventing the undesirable hot wester living. The plan here shows an overlay of our passive strategies, and as a result, we propose a network of shaded and walkable routes between different places, and also a comfortable outdoor environment. And lastly, this is an example of how solar analysis has informed our design. And as a result of the overlay of all of these passive strategies and a narrower street profile, the outdoor temperature within the main pedestrian routes increased. I'll hand into Arthur to conclude.
I think that's your time. I don't know how quickly you can conclude. Arthur, can you give us one final killer sentence?
I can. I just wanted to recap. So we got 10 new self-sufficient communities, about 9 kilometres of landscape frontage for those, 4 kilometres of shaded and walkable streets, and about 10,000 new homes altogether, 3 universities, about 8,000 additional jobs in that mixed-use place. And what we think with our client is now a scalable model for sustainable development in India, underpinned by C40, and now we're starting to see that play out in other cities across the country.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Okay guys, stay there, but unshare your screen, whoever's sharing the presentation, and I'm gonna invite the judges to join us up here.
Hi, my name is Federica. Hi, I'm an associate at Callison RTKL, and I would like just to thank you for this presentation and congratulate for this work. It's really impressive, particularly on the scale of the intervention. I have one question. Has an estimation of the new population been done yet? Do you know how many new residents we're going to have in the overall development? And if yes, I'm wondering, I've really appreciated the idea of the 5-minute walk district and the green corridors and the plaza that gives an identity to different parts of the new development, let's say. But I was wondering, if you really thought of creating different neighborhoods and giving one particular identity to each of them? And if yes, do you have an idea of how big it should be the optimal community in terms of population? So let's say, I don't know, it's 10,000 people, 6,000 people. How big is the optimal community? Since you have such a blank canvas over there to start designing it from scratch with no many restriction or constraint. What was your driver? Do you have an idea of how big is the each of the neighborhoods, and in terms of population as well?
Jaime, do you want me to start with that one, and then maybe Sogol if you chip in afterwards? So the expected target population, let's call it, from a resident perspective, is about between 20 and 25,000. So of those 10 communities, between 2 and 2,500 people per as a residential community. But really, I think the other element of that is the student population, which is more transient, and the visitor population, particularly to the large retail area in the centre. So I think there's a kind of balance to answer your point about the character of those communities. Yes, we thought there was a kind of optimal number there in terms of to give those 10 smaller communities enough critical mass and kind of footfall, but also kind of wanted to stitch them together in a way that they never really felt quiet. So that the interrelationship between open spaces, that move about dispersing universities across the piece, was all kind of part of making sure that there wasn't the kind of quiet dormitory suburb that was empty whilst people were at work. But also that kind of through the environmental strategy, it meant that you could encourage people to be out on the street throughout the whole day. So there wasn't there was a real move to make sure that the public realm was populated, not just with people who live there, but people who were moving around it as well.
I'm going to ping to you, Johnny. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. It's it's probably two questions. One is just in terms of how the city itself is set up. What I didn't quite grasp at the start was, is it like a sort of a garden city that's totally self-sustaining and linked back to other cities like Jaipur, or is it reliant on people commuting from that city out to the adjacent industrial estate? I think that's what you said, but I wasn't quite sure. Or is all the work sort of within the city? That's the first question. And how do people move about then? Because I didn't hear cars or anything like that mentioned, or public transport or anything. So just in terms of movement, how all that works. And then the second thing was just the environmental strategy. It looked like it was. I suppose there's an environmental cooling or natural cooling to the open spaces. Does that also work for the buildings, and or are the block sizes designed to do that, or is it just the open spaces that strategy works from? So that's it. Thanks.
Jaime?
Yeah, to the second question, our design was not only for the public realm, it was also defined for the typologies. We did a typological study to understand what kind of typologies traditionally were in Jaipur and how were they dealing with the heat, and also looking to the best practices. So we always focus for cross ventilation. Ventilation is super important, and maximize it as well to the buildings, not only to the public realm. So small strategies like including a shading roof on top of the building, it really cool down the mass of the building, because Jaipur is it has a really hot climate, and the sun is in a very vertical angle during the summer. So all the heat goes to the building. So it was very important as well to think about the rooftops and how that can play a really important role in cooling the buildings, as well as the size and the width of the typologies as well, to provide ventilation, natural ventilation, definitely.
So just to
just
add
want to
on
come
that,
back on the transport links, whether it's a mostly commuting facility. Is that right, Johnny?
Yeah. So the first question, I mean, the master plan is supported by the Mahindra World City, that basically is like an special economic zone. So there is a lot of industries and employment. So obviously, we were envisioning that most of the population living in our master plan is going to work and live in Mahindra World City. So it was a network of local buses provided by Mahindra that will connect our master plan that is mainly residential with the university and the retail, as well connecting with public transport to all the facilities. But also the client was thinking about people might be interested in the quality of life, and people might come from Jaipur and wanted to live in our city because of the quality that we're going to provide. And we did some preliminary studies as well to think about extension of some of the public systems that was part already of the municipality, to extend some of the networks to Mahindra. So it will be connected in the future by public transport directly to Jaipur as well.
Hilary, can I invite you to ask your question?
Yeah, hi, thanks for that, everyone. So I think it's probably leading on from Johnny's question. So it's sort of promoted as a walkable city. Is the provision for cars, will it, I mean, obviously we wouldn't want them, we didn't want them there, but will there be places for them to be parked, or how is servicing and sort of logistic routes managed?
You're in mute. So in terms of the cars, obviously, yeah, we have provision for cars, but what we are trying to do is to replicate models that we study, as for instance in Barcelona, the super blocks. So the idea is that the green corridors basically are creating those super blocks. So you have access to open space that is pedestrian only, but is also connected by roads. In terms of the provision of number of cars, again, taking into consideration the public transport network, we are trying to encourage people to move from the jobs to the residential by the public transport network that Mahindra was supplying, and also with the metro connecting to Jaipur. So we try to minimize the number of cars, reduce the width of the streets, because it was all about people and walking. And the cars is in a second dimension. However, in terms of logistics, we the red district obviously it looks like it's in the center, but it's very close to one of the main highways that is like 2 kilometers from our master plan. So it will be a direct connection from the highway direct to the red district, and there is when we have one of the biggest boulevard. And then we have the back of house connecting with all the logistics that is needed. So yeah, we have a really transport strategy developed with the ARUC team and the client. But the priority was people first, to make the space for people and public transport.
We just have 2 minutes left. So Murray, would you like to come in and
Sure.
do you have a question?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Okay, can you just recap on the, you said there are 10 connected places. Where did the number 10 come from? And secondly, presumably at 180 hectares, this is a huge undertaking from a construction point of view. I can only assume that one would build this out in phases. And therefore, do you think that your master plan can be split up into phases, with each phase still being a community whilst the rest of the master plan is still being developed?
Yeah.
So I think if I take a bit of that and then place Sogol into the answer as well, Jaime, that yep. Yes, the number 10 has a way of thinking about phasing. So there's two key things. One, we wanted to start with the park, and the first phase is in effect putting in place the resilient water infrastructure and the public access to that. The first phase that's on site at the moment is a university, and the second phase will be the first phase of residential communities. So and they will work in that sequence of 10. I think the rationale behind that was that sense of completeness at any one stage, that you have a kind of functioning landscape and a deliverable set of phases that because of our clients' kind of capability, and that they would construct much of this themselves, they were able to work in quite large phases. So that splitting it up into 10 was felt by them to be something deliverable in that time. Sogol, did you just want to say something else about that?
Yes, so I think like one of the ideas was like each of the communities, when they are developed, they feel complete as well, because each of them would have a local plaza that would provide the residents with their daily needs of like local shops and some other community facilities as well.
Brilliant. Well, that's actually your time. So I just have to thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, judges, for your feedback. Judges, I'm going to ask you to switch off your videos. You can stay on the stage to watch, but if you switch off your videos and keep yourselves on mute, then you can stick with us. And I'm going to invite our next presenters to join us on stage. But thanks very much. Congratulations, guys, on a great shortlisting and a good presentation. I hope you enjoyed that. So,
thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Hello everyone, my name is Evgeny Didorenko. I'm Associate Urban Designer from LD Design, and today I'm going to tell you about our master plan for Oktyabrsky Island in Kaliningrad, Russia, that we developed back in 2019. So, judging by my name and my accent, you probably already realized that I am Russian. Surprise. And I specifically stretched this map to include my hometown, so it's far away in Siberia. So I'm originally a Siberian guy. Back to location of the site, Kaliningrad, you probably never heard of it, but it is island of Russia located in Europe. So it used to be part of Germany till the end of World War II, and now you can see that the site has clear potential to become the rising star in the constellation of the Baltic city ports. So the Königsberg, it's the original German name of Kaliningrad, and it was really badly damaged during World War II. And after the end of World War II, Soviet government made a politic decision to not to rebuild the whole city following German building footprints, but instead of that, they wanted to build new sort of socialist exemplar city on top of the old German city. So till this day, you can clearly see and read those layers like old German churches or like Soviet brutalist architecture, or some landmarks of contemporary era of Kaliningrad, like the stadium built for World Cup 2018. So a bit of the context and a brief. So the big changes for the city really started back in 2010, when the city was joined the shortlist to be host for World Cup 2018. So shortly after that, the construction of the stadium started, which became a catalyst for development for the whole island. And supporting infrastructure obviously was built with mainly car-driven, like roads and highways and surface car parks and things like that. So in order to understand the size of the site, 385 hectares, on a site visit, it took us 1 hour to circle the whole island on a motorboat. It was lovely October evening. As a Siberian guy, was sort of ready for this. It was open boat, but my English-speaking colleagues was freezing and shaking by the end of this tour. So harsh Russian climate was number one thing to consider in our master plan. So then one important thing we needed to consider from the beginning is the sort of importance of local people who used to live in this area and who live there now. So one of the examples is founder of German philosophy, Immanuel Kant, who used to live here back in 18th century. And existing governor of the region, which is Ambition and young, forward-looking governor. And we, inspired by the people-focused sort of approach to placemaking, and we took it as a main sort of inspiration for our master plan. So now I would like you to focus on a side boundary, which was, by the way, changed its legal status and became special economic zone, and sort of offshore zone to attract Russian and foreign investment to the site. So now if we keep focused on the island and buckle our seatbelts, we will have time travel 80 years, and we'll get to year 2100. So voila, master plan is delivered. So now I will quickly go through key sort of design moves that or underlying design principles that helped us to shape the master plan, which is today. So the main idea, one of the main ideas, was to link the missing sort of green connection here and circle the green loop, which is following old fortification belts of the city. And sort of the only missing link was here on this Oktyabrsky Island. So we introduced few linear parks and the big sort of public open space around the stadium, which is already built on site. So the next big move is bringing water and big public spaces inside of the site boundary to make sure that we increase the value of development overlooking these spaces, like big central park in the western part of the site and big ecology park in the eastern part of the site. Next design move is feasible phasing strategy and self-sufficient clusters. You can probably intuitively see those chunks of development, and the whole master plan sort of intuitively divided into those parcels or islands of development floating in a landscape. So it was our intention to make sure that the master plan can be delivered in phases, and each of these phases have own sort of civic space or core with some non-residential facilities like schools, kindergartens, some commercial uses, maybe even offices, all things like that. So in the post-COVID era, it became clear for us that this was the right decision. With the era of limited mobility, we sort of understood how important it is. The next one is new connections and making sure that our island is properly connected to sort of mainland, so it doesn't exist in isolation. And another thing, we wanted to make sure that we rely on public transport in many ways, and to avoid this usual sort of Russian thing when everyone relying on private car usage. So we introduced a big sort of public transport loop that's circling around the whole island, and a lot of bridges, including pedestrian bridges, connecting island to the mainland. So in order to give you a journey through the site, we decided to split it into 4 different character areas. And I will quickly go through all of them and give you a tour through the site. So area number 1 is the island gateway, the area which is the closely connected or located next to the existing sort of core or historical core of the city. The next one is the southbound cultural quarter, which is basically constellation of city scale landmarks and cultural, sport, educational buildings, all connected, all benefiting from south facing and water overlooking. The next area is North Bank Artisan Quarter. This one is very unique because we wanted to get inspired here by the medieval structure of the Königsberg, the German city, and we wanted to achieve the same vibrancy of the narrow medieval sort of streets with fuzzy plazas, and at the same time we wanted to make it car-free and pedestrian only. So a few parking structures were introduced here to achieve that. The next one, the final 4th character area, is the archipelago. Here we wanted to sort of bring big public open space and water inside of the site, and making sure that we increase the envelope overlooking public spaces to increase value of development and put people in touch with nature properly. So now we quickly go through all these 4 character areas. The one is the island gateway, which is here we really needed to deal with existing infrastructure, make sure that this scarce sort of stitched back together all the new. So we this heavy infrastructure, flyovers and things like that, they basically failures of the previous development strategy of the city, and we instead of hiding them, we wanted to embrace them, bring life underneath, make sure that they're properly overlooked, use public art, light installations, so things like disco balls or commercial uses, play spaces, to make sure that they properly overlooked, safe and active. Another way to get to the site is by water. So imagine you're arriving on a site on water taxi, and this relationship with water and this edge condition between architecture and water was the crucial for the whole master plan. The next character area is the North Bank Artisan Quarter. The one, as I said before, we were inspired by German old Königsberg and its medieval sort of structure. We wanted to achieve this vernacular feeling of authenticity and make sure that we make it using brick, but in a modern sort of interpretation in a contemporary way. The next one is the South Bank Cultural Quarter. Here, what we wanted to do is basically, it should become a constellation of world-class attractions, and the park campus itself should become a health and well-being legacy for the whole city. And the privacy boundaries of the stadium should be defined by landscape, not with perimeter fences, as it's usually done in Russia. So the last one is Archipelago. Here we wanted to bring big nature ecology park in the middle of the site, and with its focal point, which looks like massive melting iceberg, which is the youth and ecological sort of educational center. And this park itself will become the wetland ecological habitat for local species to flourish. And at the same time, it will play a role of floodplain and mitigate potential flood impacts. If you ask myself, what is innovative about this project? Why this master plan? What is futuristic about this project? To sum up, I will say that the people-focused approach to placemaking is our innovation in Russia. And it means that people and talent is the most valuable resource, not mining, not oil, and not gas. So the most importantly, it resonates with the vision of today's governor. So if you multiply UK experience and UK approach with the scale of Russian sort of development, you will end up having exemplar model for Russian cities and other developments. Thank you for your time.
Great. Well, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I'm going to invite our judges to turn on their cameras and unmute themselves and join us. Once again, we've got Federica Baruco from Calston RTKL, Hilary Cuddy from the Design Council, Johnny McKenna from Metropolitan Workshop, and Murray Levinson from Squire and Partners. So perhaps we'll kick off with you this time, Murray, since you went last time. Do you have some questions for Evgeny?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Your master plan, I may have got this wrong, so apologies, but it seems very heavily residentially biased in terms of the images and in terms of the different zones that you've just presented with some cultural buildings. Where are all these people going to work? Don't we think the master plan should be a 24-hour community rather than a residential zone where people just disappear elsewhere to go and work?
Thank you. It's a really good question, especially in the current era of COVID when everyone is working from home. I guess what we wanted to create, that's actually specifically for this reason, we introduced those civic spaces and core areas in each of those sort of clusters to make sure that we can introduce some of this area can be flexibly used and it can be transformed to non-residential uses. So those areas can become office spaces, but also you can probably say from the master plan that it gravitates towards west. So the majority of specific office uses and office buildings to be located next to those flyovers to mitigate its potential negative impact. So we have all these things. I may not have enough time to describe all the uses location, pinpoint all of them on a plan, but it's all part of the vision, and 20,000 jobs should be created on top of the 80,000 new residents for the site.
Hilary, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. So I guess the catalyst for the development, in a way, was the stadium, the World Cup. How's the stadium used at the moment, and how do you envisage it being used in, say, 80 years? How is it probably going to be integrated into the community and made it available for everyone living there and beyond?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Local authorities are struggling to fund it at the moment because the stadium is really big. I think the capacity is around 35 or 40,000 people. Local football team, the capacity of visitors increased, I don't know, to 10,000 maybe maximum during events or the sports football games. So they're looking forward for innovative ways, potentially even some non-sport related events, make this to become a non-sport related sort of events place. So they do envisage different options how to use this stadium, and they are open to different scenarios. But our ambition was to create the sport cluster and introduce lots of different other sport supporting users. So there is a rowing school and other users which should work not only for new master plan, new residents who will be part of Oktyabrsky Island, but also for the whole city. So it's going to be a challenge. The whole idea about increasing the population of the city like 20% in 80 years time, it is a challenge for any city. So, but as a politicians, I guess they must be positive thinking and optimistic in their forecasts. So yeah, that's probably the way to think about it.
Federica, do you want to come in and mute?
Yes, please. Hi. I'm not gonna share my camera. I'm sorry, guys, but you don't want to see where I am right now. I was just wondering, since you are from LDA as well, if there was how you thought or how you treated, there was a particular thought about the spacing between the buildings, really. If there was a particular, I don't know, attention to design the streetscape or any other component or element of the outdoor life, and if yes, what were the principles that guided your design there?
That's very interesting, because our client was a Russian-based consultancy, and they were hired by the government of Kaliningrad. And this consultancy spent the whole year developing very detailed, comprehensive brief for us. It was like a 300-page document. And on top of that, the whole master plan was in a way a testing ground for this new sort of standard that this consultancy developed for us. So it is like a new standard for Russian cities. And they had a wide range of different public space typologies, starting from the big sort of open space. That's why we have big central park in the middle and big ecological park in the eastern part of the site. But at the same time, we have smaller sort of local plazas, pocket parks, and a vast variety of different public spaces to make sure that we, everyone, basically all residents, have access to public space on their doorstep. That was our key objective. And we needed to make sure that it's also following all the requirements from the brief according to this new standard. So it was all a part of the design. So it's hopefully it's readable from the plan.
Johnny, you haven't come in yet. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I was wondering, I was quite interested, the first couple of slides where you were speaking about, you showed a map of Russia and its position in Europe. And like, I can't fathom the size of Russia, you know, sitting here in Dublin. I cannot imagine like how big that place is. And it's just culturally, you sort of started off by saying that it used to be a German city. It's now a Soviet city. It got developed out as, you know, to kind of Soviet architecture, and that's how the city developed. And it seems that you're sort of almost taking the Germanic influence and using that as a sort of a starting point. Is that kind of cultural clash, or is it a clash, or is it a sort of a marriage of two systems? I was just wondering if you expand on that a little bit and what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, it is very interesting, actually. It's almost like Berlin, where this collision between East and West happened. So you can see those traces of Eastern and Western sort of influenced. And it is very interesting. It was very inspiring. And the best thing about it, that the residents of Kaliningrad, they love every sort of different layers of its history. So they equally love everything related to German past. And looking for this, they're struggling with identity. That's why we introduced this, the character area, which is inspired by medieval German city. So at the same time, we're not saying that this page was sort of wrong. We're trying to use this as a rich legacy and build on top of this legacy instead of instead of just getting rid of it. So it's so sort of interlinked, and that's what we're trying to do, because everywhere where you have this cultural interconnections, you need to appreciate this past, and the most importantly, people who live there, they love it. It's part of their legacy and part of their history. So we embraced it and get inspired by all these things. It is very interesting and sort of unique opportunity for us.
Well, that is pretty much time. So I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. And judges, if you want to switch your cameras off, I'm going to invite our next two presenters up. And I'm just going to thank you, Evgeny, and you're welcome to stick around, and best of luck.
Thank you, Christine.
So I'm now going to invite to the stage the presenters for Future Energy Campus, which is Ian McDonald from Artes University of the Arts, and Jacopo Bongiorno, who's from he's a professor of nuclear science and engineering from MIT. Absolutely, probably the very first time we've had a nuclear scientist join us.
So thank you for the invitation, and without further ado, we were invited by a corporation in Japan to look at the future working campus for energy generation. And this energy generation would be based around nuclear power. And of course, post-Fukushima, this was a very sensitive area. However, we looked at this coastal site, which will be slightly ambiguous at the moment due to its sensitivity, which was on a plain between the northeast coast of Japan, a ridgeline to the west, a disused site to the north, and a township and existing plant to the south. One of the aspects we were thinking about in this project, at the very early stage, working with Jacopo and his team, was that we felt this could be a new paradigm for future working communities. That we have to think about how we will coexist with machines, because much of the working in this energy generation campus of the future will not just be human-led, it will also be driven by AI, by automation. There will be aspects to do with safety, but more importantly, will be a community of over 1,000 workers, some of whom will spend their whole career there. And one of the aspects that we looked at in thinking about this project was drawing on our experience of working with other similar projects. So Hinckley and Moorside, for example, in the UK, and also talking with those who work and live in the Japanese context. And this space, from this consultation, gave us the ideas about we were going to be designing for 7 decades. Another aspect we had to bear in mind was that this workplace would also move between what we would call human-centric and technology-centric attributes. And we would be designing a space and a place that was influenced by non-cultural entities. Over to you, Jim.
Okay, yeah. I apologize there for the little technical difficulties. So all my background is in science and engineering, so I'm not going to comment on the more architecture-specific aspects. I think Ian do a much better job here. But I just want to say a few words maybe about the bigger picture importance of this particular project and the architecture that Ian conceived for this particular site. So there is a growing interest in using low carbon energy technologies such as nuclear to decarbonize the energy system and the economy globally. When it comes to nuclear in particular, the primary hurdle or obstacle to the growth and expansion of this technology currently is really cost. And the traditional model, which is based on large nuclear power plants located at fixed sites for 6 or 7 decades, is not optimal from the point of view of delivering electricity, heat, or any other energy products at acceptable cost. And so one aspect that really intrigued me in this project with Ian was the opportunity to design an energy campus which can be versatile over a period of decades. And it will start with a certain number and type of nuclear reactors, but it might evolve over the decades into something different with nuclear and other technologies. And again, the idea here is to make it versatile and flexible enough so that you can accommodate different production activities. At first, for this particular site, the vision was to use it as a electricity generator. But over time, this could become a facility in which you could, for example, produce hydrogen or synthetic fuels for transportation, or use the electricity and heat for manufacturing processes, etc. And so it was important from the very beginning to keep that broader vision in mind. And I think Ian did a very good job at creating this layout and this architecture that have that level of intrinsic feasibility in it. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So one of the aspects that really made us think about what would the future look like 10, 20, 30 years for this working community was to move away from the idea that power is like oil and gas, it's dirty, it's messy. We think that everything here is actually more aligned with the tech industry, so we would call it clean tech, because there are very few emissions, most of the aspect is digitalized, and of course going forward we will see greater automation. So our master plan envisaged 3 stages, each with a nuclear island comprising 3 reactors, and these were dictated by functional requirements. But in stage 1, we would have security, training, education, exposition, ops, maintenance, and the first nuclear island set within a blue-green landscape. And this would be a 24/7 activity. Then phase 2, we would increase what we call balance of plant, which is the maintenance, research and development, again with external university engagement, warehousing and co-located innovation, and a second nuclear island. And then thirdly, we would have an additional nuclear island and a much wider extrapolation of the blue-green landscape. What's also interesting is that we would not need power to start work on site because we would bring a micro battery. The other aspect that we had to think about, if you think on the top left here, is avoiding visual monotony. Quite often people see these sorts of developments and think that they are completely inhuman, but we think there is an opportunity through DFMA, through the increase in materials that are available to us, to take this forward into a different language. And we were very interested not just in new materials and in what we were doing, say, bottom right with data, but we were also interested in the historical presence of places like the Hakone Sculpture Park, where they were able to put very simple objects and building into a lush landscape. So in the future energy campus, what we felt was that by placing the DOP at the balance of plant, that's all the non-nuclear reactor buildings in the center, at the heart of the campus, it would be a visual expression of an architecture that's empathic and understandable to the observer. And that was quite a different departure from many traditional sites where they're very linear and there are great distances to walk between all the individual buildings, whereas here, there would be no more than a 5-minute walk. But if it's a working environment and it's a smart energy campus, we also felt there was an opportunity here to do something else. Unlike most process-based design, we integrated methodologies from the arts in our approach for planning location of structures and human-machine campus movement to generate a sonography beyond optimized routing. We could imagine, if we took Levectin as an example, ramps, so we have robots, an embassy of data like Richard Weigand, where you explain everything that's going on virtually in a physical sense. We would have data innovator hutches, so we take the garage idea and turn it into a deep hut which we put in the landscape area, climbing walls for health, ASMR, and infomedia, so that the general townscape of the environment becomes less about power and more about what people are doing and how people are living and working together. One of the key aspects, I think, though, is that we've placed a high importance on the hygiene and well-being cross-generational. For a high-performing work culture, this is extremely important, and for the wider community. We can see green corridors through the development. We want to see art used in what would, for some people, say a strange environment. We like the idea of third-party engagement. Bottom left is an idea where you would have a pop-up shop within the admin building where you take your own garments and you're fed through without water or chemicals and turned into other clothes. These are all part of the technology interchange expansion Jacopo was touching on. But most importantly, of course, post-COVID, is how would this operate? How would people spending their career here feel year on year? I think the other aspect that we were trying to approach in answering that question was not everything has to be super elaborated. The buildings, the robust buildings, which they need to be for health and safety reasons and technical reasons, but also for the aspect of being able to stand over time, is the fabric selection of the significant structures has to match that lifetime. So therefore, in the coherence of architecture and context, we felt that the forms should be quite sculptural and they should sit alongside nature. And finally, I would say that although it's not quite as literal, we would look at the way that Japanese script is written with a brush, and you have a sort of stream of consciousness. And in laying out this sort of landscape urbanism, we were seeking some form of similarity in so much as what you see is like a stroke through the middle, which is the balance of plant, and around this is almost the edge of the paper, which is a white reactor buildings. There are many questions that we've yet to resolve there are other questions that we've yet to even think about. And we bring it all back to this question. In the near future, with the oncoming reality of human-machine co-working, what will space and place be like if it is influenced by non-cultural entities?
Thanks very much. If you want to unshare the screen, I'm going to invite the judges to turn on their cameras and become visible. And I'm sure they have some interesting questions. I mean, certainly the idea of a more AI future is one that we haven't quite grasped how it's going to impact the city. Who would like to go first this time? Hillary, can I throw you in straight away?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. It's really interesting. I guess my question would be around how it relates or integrates with surrounding communities. So the location is ambiguous, obviously, but you mentioned there's a township south of the campus. Would they, I mean, is this going to be open to the public? How would they benefit from it? I mean, the nuclear landscape in Japan obviously is quite sensitive. And so, how are you going to gain trust? How would trust be gained, or what would be the benefits for the community?
Well, one of the first buildings that is built is the Education Expo Centre that I was talking about, which at the edge of the site is where the landscape comes over to it. And this sits alongside the training buildings, which are always built in advance of such development. And the whole question is that it's science and education. In many nuclear sites now, we're able to enter the site because much of the security is not on the perimeter but on the buildings. The other aspect is this technology is about passive security. So everything that happens within the building is locked within the building, quite different from the previous generations of technology. The other aspect is that, as Jacopo mentioned, we see a science-based research expanding within here, so the site over time will become mixed use. One of the other reasons why we choose a very sort of flowing sculptural nature to the buildings is that they could sit in your backyard. There is no safety limit beyond the perimeter of the building, which is quite an advancement from where we were before. And we would see this as an example of, over time, the city edge moving right up to the campus and beyond.
Ian, maybe let me just add a 30-second comment on this. From a more technical or engineering point of view, all the critical structures and systems that are vital to the safety and security of the reactor, for these new designs, which Ian correctly characterized as passively safe or secure. In our community, we also use the word intrinsic safety, intrinsic security. They are mostly located below grade, and that opens up the space above grade and the vast majority of the area on this energy campus to other activities without encroaching on safety and security requirements. So it's really a significant departure from the traditional nuclear power plant and frankly many other industrial facilities which were not designed and deployed with security in mind, because they were deployed prior to 9/11 or prior to the age in which we live, where security is paramount.
Yeah, like it's really interesting. It's like nothing like anything I've ever seen before. So I suppose I'm no expert, so please don't take this the wrong way. But you know what you showed and the precedents you showed, they seemed very I suppose scientific and techy and almost kind of wiped down surfaces. And I was just wondering where in that are the people and those interstitial spaces, and if this is a work community, and you know. I expect in the tech industry and the energy industry that creativity is required, then where are those sort of in-between spaces where that can happen?
So in the centre where the balance of plant is, we have actually put together 3 or 4 different structures at a time. And that was based on partly the coastal conditions, but also the idea that we would connect them at ground and upper level with corridors, etc., that you could move through. Another aspect is that within those kind of, let's call them Uber blocks, Johnny, we would actually see having various uses now because they don't need to be mono use. So that there's an aspect to it. In terms of the physical expression of the building in colour, we have found over recent times that when you've got a very long-lasting structure and you add pattern and colour to it, there's a lot of degradation. So, for example, Sizewell, keeping the buildings blue. This whole question of character and expression is partly internal, as we were talking about, and it's partly yet to be resolved. And when coming towards today, we were actually not coming with every answer. We think this is a journey on which we're going, and we would actually see greater input from the arts on this question. So we're starting with something relatively neutral. I'm not sure we'll end up with the colour of a kimono, but I think it's partly based on the fact that one thing we have noticed is that the form in the landscape is quite important. And we all know when we look at 1980s postmodern buildings, the difficulty you get, you try and camouflage something.
So stay tuned, and we don't know what it looks like exactly yet. Murray, do you want to come in with a question?
Sure, thank you. I have to say that I'm struggling a little bit with this proposition to understand how this site could possibly be a sense of place for people, and so the whole kind of idea that you've got, obviously, you know, the sort of you know, the advancement in technology of nuclear power and greening of the grid is, you know, a great thing. But in relation to the creation of a sense of place for people to work, people to live, and people to play, do you think that your master plan answers those questions?
Well, if I compare it to previous sites, by imposing a grid previously, say in Hinckley, we dropped it 40% in terms of its footprint. Here we've managed to go about 20% shorter. I think one of the aspects about where people meet, this is quite a temperate climate, high precipitation on the coast, which gets quite a lot of rainfall and storms. So by its very nature, you will have, we say, covered space, not necessarily gallerias. I think one of the questions that we need to look at, if you look to your average science technology campus, it's probably a 40% car parking. So here, one of the aspects is being to, as I said earlier, to draw the buildings closer together where possible, but also to try and draw uses together under one roof, and then put the greenery, put the running tracks, etc., on the roofs. I think one of the key things at this point in time is that what do we always mean by place? We do place a lot of emphasis on human contact, but we have to realize that, for example, machines here will not read color. We have to think about the AGVs. We also have to think about the drones, which we did this studying of, but we also have to think about the interfaces we will see 10, 20, 30 years from now. To purely set it up on pedestrian movement, for example, would be to negate the way things will be necessary 10 years from now. That is not to say that the human principle of community should not be the strongest point here, but we also have to think about our own adaptation, because I think that is the biggest challenge here, which is what does a future working environment look like if we have no cultural reference for it necessarily other than what we know today, rather than the way technology is taking us.
Feels like there's a really big discussion here about different visions of the future, but Federica, I'm going to bring you in now.
Yeah, I had a few questions, but I believe that they've been already answered somehow. It was mainly about the mobility in general, from the city to the development, and also internally, and how people would move from one area or the others of the development of the compound and through buildings. But it's been already partially answered. I don't know if there's anything else that it's of interest or that they want to add, on this topic, on the mobility strategy, really.
Well, one thing I would say is that there is a main rail line that's quite close to the site. And the question would be, during construction, would you actually bring a spur into the site and then use that for future use as part of the loop? Second question, from our point of view, would be that everything that's within the site and connecting to the residential area would be electric, because obviously we're producing electricity via the microreactor that precipitates development from day one. Going forward to that, I think there's a whole question about what other power sources could be generated. We mentioned hydrogen, etc. And I think these are some of the exciting possibilities for not just how this campus would operate, but how the wider area would operate, including the whole transportation network in that zone.
Could I add a comment, which I'm not sure it addresses directly the question was asked by Mary, but it might be related to it. So if you look at the big picture in terms of decarbonization of the economy worldwide, only about 25% is associated with the power grid. 75% is in other sectors of the economy, transportation, of course, industry, agriculture, buildings, etc. There's a whole set of applications that can be decarbonized using locally produced electricity and heat, for example, from a nuclear reactor. And some of those activities should be co-located where your energy source is. So in this case, potential location would be the site itself. I'm referring to things like indoor aquaculture or portable farms. They require electricity to create an environment that is suitable for example, for fish growth or plant growth in terms of temperature, humidity, and light. There are portable pharmaceutical facilities. So this, and again, they require raw materials, but also electricity and heat for the processes. So this campus could really become an engine of economic activities, but not strictly related to energy. Yes, you do need those energy sources to drive those activities, but it could be much more diverse. That might be an aspect to keep in mind. You think about, is this a site where people will want to be? I think so, not just if they are working at the nuclear power plant, but there will be a lot of co-located activities there.
Well, that's our time. So that just leaves me to thank you both for your presentation and judges for your feedback. This is actually the close of this session. The judges are going to go and deliberate. So I'm just going to say thank you so much to all of our presenters. Thank you very much to our judges, Federica Barrico from Caliston RTKL, Hilary Cuddy from the Design Council, Johnny McKenna from Metropolitan Workshop, and Mary Levinson from Squire & Partners. This concludes the presentations of the projects shortlisted for International Future Place. Three very different presentations from around the world. Our judges will be speaking to decide the winner, and we'll be back to announce which project is going to win the coveted Golden Pineapple on the 13th of November, on the Friday, from 3:30 to 4:30. And I'll be back here tomorrow with 3 more projects in competition for a Golden Pineapple. So bye, and I'll see you in the social lounge.